What's up?
Hey, Dragon. Thank you for coming on this stream. I do appreciate it, and welcome also to our audience out there listening. I do appreciate you guys tuning in. I want to talk about a very important subject tonight. Today is Columbus Day. Yay! So, congratulations, everyone. It's another day in your life. But it's more than that, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Columbus Day, and in this day and age today, it's become so polarizing, just the topic of Christopher Columbus. And it's been absolutely disheartening for for me to just witness and see people just in general across this country begin to revile and hate one of the greatest explorers, one of the greatest men in history of all time, Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus essentially sailed across the Atlantic Ocean in, in this, not knowing completely if he would succeed in the late 1400s, with risks of drowning at sea, risk of crashing at sea, being marooned at sea, risk of just being lost at sea, starvation, hunger, madness, drowning, death. And the man who literally helped begin the exploration of the Western world, and who literally, helped found the Western Hemisphere as we know it. But today, now we're seeing people all across this country turn against Christopher Columbus, one of the greatest heroes of our time. People revile him. People are trying to take down his statues. Cities are removing his statues. And now we're seeing efforts to try to remove Columbus Day and switch it with Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it's very troubling that we are forgetting our history, that we're not honoring our heroes. And this is just a sad state of affairs today. And I wanted to discuss this and talk about this. And I'm really glad to see Dragon Roz here with me to discuss this topic tonight as well. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. The reason why they're replacing him with Indigenous Days, I think, is that you've heard this common narrative that he's like a genocide, a mass murderer, like he killed Native Americans. That he's an Indians. I mean, like he was. Yeah, butcher. You heard this narrative, right?
Yeah, it's the whole lie about how Christopher Columbus was this genocidal maniac and this nonsense that's been going on. But also, too, they try to attribute to him all future indigenous versus European conflicts to him, and essentially try to put the blame on him and saying, if he had not sailed across the ocean and discovered America, this would have never happened. But
Yeah,
so
but I
they don't
think
just lay,
that
they don't just
even if
accuse him,
he,
they
yeah,
lay
but
the
it's
blame on him.
usually the people around him. It's usually the people around him. Like I said before, like the thing, like it's nuanced. Like okay, there was a conflict between Europeans and Indians, but at the same time, like the Indians were literally fighting each other. I mean, like it wasn't from like I don't think the Native Americans disappeared just because of the Europeans. Europeans like Columbus. I mean, like yeah, but like there were Indian tribes that are also brutal on aspect. I mean, they even killed their own. They even killed their own Indians or members of different tribes.
Exactly. There were lots of conflicts in America, in North America, between indigenous and European peoples, but also before we even got here, before ancestors came here, it was indigenous peoples versus indigenous peoples. Apache versus Cheyenne. Iroquois versus Arapaho, and all these other different conflicts. So it's not like these, or Crow versus this tribe or that tribe. It's not like the Western Hemisphere North and South America was this wonderful, peaceful little la la land where, nothing bad happened and everything was
Until the
wonderful.
white man showed up.
Yeah, it's not like that's not like it in the least. I mean, we if you look at the histories of America before Europeans came here, is actually pretty brutal. I mean, let's not. I mean, one of the most well-known examples of it would have to be Central America with the Aztecs. I mean, we know that when the Spanish got there, they discovered that the Aztecs were committing human sacrifice, and they were. That's why the Aztecs were not very popular with their neighbors, because the Aztecs loved to essentially conquer a tribe and sacrifice a bunch of the people of the other tribe, if not the whole tribe, as a show of devotion to their gods. To placate the sun god and make the crops grow and the rain fall. And people say, "Oh, well, that's just one example." Okay, well, look at other indigenous societies in
It's kind of
South America.
tied to the founding. It's kind of tied to the founding fathers, to where they're accused of committing genocide also.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to accuse Christopher Columbus of conflicts between indigenous peoples and European peoples in every context.
Well,
Not just
I wouldn't even say the founders were even genocidal. I mean, just by I wouldn't say people like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington had were planning. I mean, were genocidal in the least. That's I mean, yeah, they were slave owners, but they didn't want. It's not like they wanted to wipe out native peoples just for the sake of we'll create a white ethno state. You can go ahead.
no. Let's look at I was sending you some private chat. So, but it's the fact of the matter is that the conflicts that happen between Native American peoples and European peoples, it's all they all try to blame every single bad thing that happened in mainland America on Christopher Columbus, because they want to delegitimize him, and it's a part of the strategy to try to delegitimize the Western world, to delegitimize Western
You can look at
civilization.
countries at Britain, they're heavily defeatist. It's one of the most defeated countries out there. It's shame of their culture. One time it used to be a British, a great empire. Now everybody's I guess feels bad because about European imperialism.
Yeah, totally. It's disappointing to see, just how far, Western civilization has fallen, in which we literally are, allowing these terrible, these people, these communists and these anarchists and such, to essentially destroy, the memory and the legacy of one of history's greatest explorers and men of history, men of action, men of daring. I mean, people don't understand, just how dangerous it was to literally get on a boat like that, a boat, limited supplies, limited water, using the stars to guide you and the wind to try to carry you, literally sail, thousands of miles of ocean and not knowing if you would make it. I mean, they don't understand the courage that was involved with that. They don't
Yeah,
understand.
it was basically, it took them at least months to get there with the ship.
Oh, absolutely.
Nobody thought they would make it, because it's too far out in the open, and Christopher Columbus was the guy to take the risk. I mean, if you didn't discover America, I mean, if he didn't do what he did, it's possible that this country would not be founded.
Oh yeah, absolutely. because without Christopher Columbus, without him coming into the New World, Western civilization would not exist the way we know it. The West, in North America, Central America, South America, European colonization by the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, the British, the Dutch, etc., was a result because of Christopher Columbus's daring and bravery and courage. I mean, essentially, we're never going to experience we will probably not experience something like that because, we were born too early to explore the earth so we were born too late to explore the earth, and we were born too early to, really explore the galaxy. But it's so amazing that we can look at, people like Christopher Columbus, and they can inspire us, and they can inspire our future children and our future grandchildren to do the same thing with the galaxy, to explore beyond what we have now in our solar system and to see beyond the stars. I mean, the people like Christopher Columbus are those legendary figures who did things that, today, if are just mind-boggling to think of, the incredible risks that they took, to do what they did. And it's just a shame that he's being bastardized by the communists and by the Marxists as this, evil genocidal figure. A total bunch of nonsense. But the problem is that when these people are trying to delegitimize him, and in this day and age of moral relativism,
he didn't even commit genocide.
Yeah, I know. It's like they assume that because there were conflicts between in native peoples and Europeans, that Europeans were just in the wrong all the time. It's never, the fact that it's never that that native peoples attacked the European peoples who came and, tried to kill them or sacrifice them to their pagan gods or stuff like that. I mean, that was a fate that happened to an unfortunate many, Western explorers, killed by natives or, sacrificed to their, pagan gods, cannibalized on, or all sorts of things. I mean, that's another practice too that occurred in the Western world before Europeans came and Christianized it. I mean, there was not just human sacrifice, there was also cannibalism in many areas. I mean, and that was serious danger that you'd crash on an island and you'd wind up being grabbed and picked up by a tribe of cannibals. And that did happen to people. So that's another risk that Christopher Columbus was taking right there. He didn't know if the people that he would find would be friendly or nice or would just be hostile. And, Christopher Columbus lost many friends and associates because of, native people's violence against these European explorers.
Yeah. And plus the Native Americans, it's not like different. It's not like the whole country was theirs. Like it was like they wouldn't even each tribe would consider they all of them together didn't even agree with each other. Like there were different Native Indian nations, like the Cherokee, the the other.
Well, there's numerous ones. I mean, so many to count. There's like Arapaho, there's Creole, there's Seminole, there's Mayan, there's Tarascan, there's Apache, there's Crow.
Do you know them all?
I don't know them all. No, that's way too many. But it goes to my
hundreds of tribes. Like they all consider themselves like part of different nations.
Mm-hmm. And they were all trying to capture and conquer and subjugate one another. It's not like they lived in this perfect socialist paradise, but that's the suggestion though that's out there though. It's a lot of the attacks on Columbus and the bastardization of Christopher Columbus is partly because the socialists think that America pre 1492 was something like akin to the socialist ideas of, let's peace and love and harmony and all that nonsense. Which is totally ridiculous, because we already know that the people's
Well, they actually believe. Reason why they say that, like even if they know that, they just believe. They just kind of believe that everything has a right to its own self-determination, except for the United States. Or they just have like a bias, kind of like, for example, that like they kind of have this more relativist attitude of, well, it's their culture, but it's bad when the Europeans do it. Or like, for example, like it's kind of like, like they're just mad that the white man did it. The white man did all the conquering.
Well, they're mad because what Christopher Columbus represents is the foundations of Western civilization, of Christianity, of coming
They wouldn't.
to the Americas.
They wouldn't mind. They wouldn't mind if other people, if different, if other races did it. They're just mad that white. They're just mad that it was white Europeans.
Well, they're also mad too because their plan to delegitimize Christopher Columbus as a person is partly Marxist, communist attempts at historical revisionism, but I also want to suggest to you
and white guilt.
Yeah, exactly. It's also anti-white, anti-European American, anti-European guilt. The suggestion that, Europeans are to blame for everything. Woe is, Europeans are evil. It's essentially a lot of, self-hate, a lot of anti-European feeling, but also self-hating Europeans too, which is totally ridiculous. But it's usually directed at people who have English ancestry, but it's not usually directed at people with French or Spanish ancestry or Portuguese ancestry. I mean, but the fact of the matter is that the English were not the only ones who colonized America. Okay, it was the Spanish, it was the French, it was the Dutch, Holland, is Spaniards as well, and I think a lot, unfortunately, what we're seeing today is just this idea that America is bad, America is evil, and this idea of nonsense of stolen land and all this garbage. It just makes it's just so mind-boggling, but it really just comes down to essentially
kind of portrays that America was founded by theft.
Yeah, which is nonsense. America, as we know it, was founded by explorers. It was founded by brave men and women who literally risked everything to explore the unknown.
In that case, like every country, you might as well, like if America, like if the United States and Israel were founded by conquest, you might as well make the same argument about every nation, like Russia, Russia, China, and pretty much Portugal. All these all nations are pretty much founded by conquest by that logic.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the problem is that they give indigenous peoples in America sort of like a free pass, or like communist societies a free pass. But everything else though, with Western civilization, particularly, no, that's bad and that's evil. It's all terrible and all this nonsense. When I look at it, but I also want to suggest to you and the audience that the hatred against Christopher Columbus is not just communist historical revisionism and also anti-European, anti-Christian and anti-Western civilization sentiment. It also is anti-Semitic, because
how?
Well, because
how so?
Because Christopher Columbus was actually Jewish. He was actually not. He was actually a lot of people think that he was Italian. That is history is actually, but there's been a lot of evidence that has shown that Christopher Columbus was not actually from Italy or from Genoa, as so the historians incorrectly placed him
He
at.
could be an Italian Jewish, like his last name Columbus.
Well, there's heavy, substantial evidence that Christopher Columbus was actually Portuguese. He's born in Portugal. He was born
Well,
of
he's more like a Portuguese Jew.
Yeah, so he was a Portuguese. Yeah, exactly. He was a Portuguese child of a relationship between a Portuguese
Yeah, but
prince.
they're not attacking him. Like if he's, I mean, they're just attacking him because he's like like he's mainly like how is it anti? They're not even attacking him because he's Jewish. Like
Well,
because
it is that because I'll explain in a moment. Because he was the son of a Portuguese prince. He was an illegitimate son, and his mother was Jewish. And he came. He was also he was in the employ of the Portuguese royalty, of the Portuguese king. He was actually a secret agent on behalf of the Portuguese king. People say, well, why did he go to the Spanish court then? Because he was on a secret mission on behalf of the Portuguese king, in order to help shift the line in which the Catholic Church had divided the Western world between Spain and Portugal. Because the Spain and the Portuguese knew that there was a landmass out there. They knew that there was land out there in far away. They understood, but they just didn't know exactly where it was. They didn't know. They didn't have, they didn't know where it was exactly. And the Catholic Church, mediated disputes between Spain and Portugal and other Christian empires and monarchies, and it ruled that Spain would get this, but Portugal would get this. Well, the Portuguese king wanted more than he was going to be getting from the deal for what the Catholic Church had made between the Spanish royalty and the Portuguese royalty. And so he sent Christopher Columbus to Spain to go to the Spanish royalty and request the funds and request the ships necessary to go on a voyage, under the guise that he would be sailing for Spain, but rather he would be in the employ of the Portuguese king. And he would be substantial in assisting Portugal in essentially being able to lay claim to more land to expand their Portuguese empire. Now, but there are also personal reasons, though, as to why he did it. And this is where I'm going to come into the anti-Semitism that these communists and Marxists deploy against Columbus. Why these attacks on him are partially anti-Semitic, because Christopher Columbus
it's
was
not even intentionally being anti-Jewish. It's just that nobody knows. I mean, not too many people know he's Jewish in the first place.
Well, let me continue. So with Christopher Columbus, he actually, so when he set sail in 1492, he set sail during a very specific time. He was setting selling sail on a specific Jewish holiday. So when but also an important, no, sorry, not a Jewish holiday, an important event for Jewish people. Because in 1492, remember, Spain had essentially banned Jews from Spain. They essentially said you either convert to Catholicism, or you leave, or you die. And so when Christopher Columbus left, he left on the final day of which Jewish people could either convert to the Catholic Church or would have to leave Spain. And Christopher Columbus's mission was on behalf of Portugal's monarchy, but he also was doing this for personal reasons. He was going west because he wanted to find a new promised land for Jewish people. He wanted to find a landmass to help Jewish people escape the persecution of the Spanish, but also persecution of other, neighbors that, both in the Caliphate and both in, Christian Europe that had been discriminating against them. And so him landing in the Caribbean and, finding islands like Cuba, for example, which was him essentially trying to find a place where Jewish people could finally be free and escape from the persecution they were facing. And so part of these efforts
he only landed He only landed in Cuba. In Cuba, though, in the Caribbean, he didn't actually land in America.
Well, not in America as we know it, but definitely on the American continent, and in Central North America, however you want to define it, but the Americas. And what he did, what people now do is when they attack Christopher Columbus, they're essentially attacking the idea. They're essentially attacking. They're attacking Jewish people once again on the idea that Jewish people aren't allowed a homeland, because all the anti-Israeli sentiment that goes on in the world is essentially a bunch of anti-Semites on the progressives and the alt-right who say that Jews aren't deserving of a homeland. But the fact
I would say more so the alt-right than the progressives. I would say I would say the one. I think it's mainly attack Israel because of its success, and it's probably because they were already on the other side anyway.
But that's why they attack Christopher Columbus, though. It's because at the end of the day, what they are trying to do,
well, he's successful.
Yeah, is delegitimize, and cut Jewish people at the knees, as these groups always do, and the people, but it's really disappointing and sad. But what happened? This anti-Columbus argument really comes down to three things. One, it's just essentially anti-Western communist Marxist propaganda attempts to delegitimize America and the West. Two, it's anti-European sentiment. It's the idea that Europeans are just bad and that's it. And at three, it's also subtle anti-Semitism. The idea that Jewish people aren't deserving of a homeland or a nation they can call their own.
Actually, the left they actually used to support Israel back in the day until France, for example, until 1967. And it rejected the idea because it was gaining a lot of strength at the time. It was becoming more successful. And it was finally becoming independent.
Well, and that's this just anti, Columbus sentiment is just driving me insane. It makes me mad because we have a person who literally did.
I didn't think he would make you mad, but I mean, yeah.
Well, it makes me mad because you have one of the greatest people in history, literally being bastardized.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's kind of like I figure like some people on the right are finally committed and say, yeah, he kind of did this so and so. I figure the reason why I said that because I think I'm kind of conceding a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is that, and I'm going to post the link to this in the chat so people can take a look at that. So people can actually review the documentary I'm talking about, because people don't actually know that Christopher Columbus was Portuguese. The secrets about him. There's a lot of, unfortunately, about Christopher Columbus that we don't know because he is so shrouded in mystery. And unfortunately, he took some of those secrets, sadly, to his grave. But we do know that Christopher Columbus was a great, man, a great brave explorer, and he should be an icon for the people of Portugal, for Portuguese Americans, for the Portuguese diaspora. And even though he is not Italian by ancestry or blood, Italian Americans still should, Italian Americans have, in a way, adopted him as one of their own. And we should celebrate that fact that, Columbus has that far-reaching effect, that he did so many incredible, amazing things in his time, despite the obstacles, despite the danger, and defines Western Christian civilization in North, South, and Central America.
Yeah, I would say the point is about what I was gonna say I never heard you say the word Happy Indigenous Day.
Well, I'm just going to say, well, I'll address that in a moment. But Tristan says, I knew he was Portuguese, but I did not know he was Jewish, and wanted to help find a homeland. I quite respect that good man, and that's what, yeah, and that's the incredible thing is that when Christopher Columbus left Spain, he left the day of the final point in which Jews living in Spain, Jewish Spaniards, were given essentially the deadline where it was either convert to Catholicism, leave Spain, or suffer the penalty of death. And it wasn't coincidence. Columbus was on a personal note, besides being on a mission from the King of Portugal to help expand Portugal's influence in those undiscovered new lands. What Christopher Columbus on a personal note wanted to do was ensure that Jewish people could find a new homeland in this unknown place that he was exploring, because he saw the persecution of Jewish Spaniards and wanted to give those people a place where they could be safe and they could find refuge. And so the attacks upon Christopher Columbus are not just attacks upon Christianity, because Christopher Columbus was Catholic by religion and Jewish by ancestry. There are also attacks upon essentially Jewish identity, because it's a mixture of anti-Christian sentiment, but also anti-Semitism, that stifles this. That is the source of this hatred against Christopher Columbus, because a lot of these Marxists, a lot of these communists,
yeah, but they don't know he's Jewish. But that's not.
Well, that assumes that they don't know. I think in reality, if you look at his background and who he is, you discover that for example, when he died, Jewish custom is you leave 10%, you leave a portion of your wealth to the poor. He left about 10 to 15% of his wealth when he died to the poor. He also had other things that when he was deceased, done in the Jewish custom, and he took his ancestry very seriously, even though he was Catholic by religion. And I think that when we look at Christopher Columbus today and the hatred against him, it's a mixture of anti-Western, anti-Christian, anti-European feelings and thought, but also to subtle anti-Semitism under the surface. And I think, I find it troubling, though.
It's more catering to the Native Americans.
Well, if you want an Indigenous Peoples Day, make one. No one's stopping people from making an Indigenous Peoples Day. If you want to make one that celebrates the good aspects of Native American or Indigenous cultures,
but they want to make that the main holiday on October 12th.
What they want to do is replace Columbus Day with that, and I say no. Get your own day. It's not. What they're trying to do is replace Christopher Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day, because what they're essentially trying to do is give an FU to Columbus and an FU to Christian civilization, an FU to Western civilization, but also just an FU to the Jewish diaspora, because again they all view America and Israel as colonial projects, and so this is why they're advocating for trying to remove Columbus Day and change it to Indigenous Peoples Day. It's because what they're trying to essentially win the culture war against Western civilization, against Christian civilization, and also against against Jews as well. So they're being discriminatory and bigoted on three fronts. And they're doing this because what they want to do is essentially delegitimize, once again, America's foundations and America's identity and America's history, and replace it eventually with a Marxist Leninist or communist idea. And that is why we have to fight against that.
Yeah. That's going to be up to Congress to pass that. I mean, it's probably going to be big. I mean, it'll probably go up to a legislature.
Well, we have to make sure that, we advocate on behalf of Christopher Columbus, that we tell the truth about who he was and his great legend. I mean, I want the people who are watching to think about this. Christopher Columbus had an idea of where he was going, but the Spanish crown, the Portuguese crown, and the Vatican Church knew that there was land beyond, beyond Spain, beyond Western Africa. They knew that there was land out there. They just didn't have a complete accurate idea of where it was, and how much of it was out there. And Christopher Columbus literally, not because we look at it today and we don't understand just how dangerous it was, because we look at it today, we can cross literally an ocean, and literally, with a plane, within, hours or a day. A journey like that took, 2.5, 3 months on a ship with the cramped conditions, limited water, limited food, exposed to the sun, exposed to the wind, exposed to the cold on deck, exposed into, suffering from the heat inside the deck, literally having to deal with all these dangers. And then the dangers when they got there, the dangers of tropical disease, the dangers of hostile natives, some of them cannibals, some of them human, engaging in human sacrifice. Not just that, it's just all those natural dangers in terms of, like I said, disease, tropics, lack of water, lack of food, and just, going out there and doing what they did. That's a incredible bravery, incredible courage. And people, are just spitting on it and bastardizing it.
I mean, do you even find this taught in schools?
I don't think so, no, because I think what a lot of these people want to do is just is essentially, just destroy, essentially, the idea of Columbus. That's why we're seeing so many Christopher Columbus statues literally being attacked. We're literally seeing them being draped with flags or pulled down. We're seeing them removed from places in which, by force, by intimidation, like literally tearing them down and ripping them down, even having statues, Christopher Columbus statues, beheaded. It's just absolutely disgraceful, and this is, and I just want to bring up our weak political leadership, who literally are, allowing this to happen for political points.
Are they trying to pass a bill right now?
Well, let me show the viewers a little video in just a second, with with Democrat, Nancy Pelosi, about the Columbus statue. This was back in 2020, mind you, but this is a good listen. So I'm going to share the screen so everyone can take a look at this. So the viewers can watch this.
Madam Speaker, this question is close to home for you. The city of Richmond is obviously in sync with the Confederate statues, but in Baltimore and Little Italy, the statue of Christopher Columbus was removed or taken down. And I wondered if you have any to share about that.
Well, I'm not a big, I don't even have my grandmother's earrings. I'm not a big, let's see what we have in terms of monuments and this. I'm more interested in what people have accomplished. I think that it's up to the communities to decide what statues they want to see. But I think that it's very important that we take down any of the statues of people who committed treason against the United States of America, as those statues exist in the Congress of the halls of Congress, in the rotundas, not the rotunda, I don't think, but in the statuary hall, and the rest remote, some of them are. But I'm not one of those people who's wedded to, a statue to somebody someplace is an important thing. I don't, again, if the community doesn't want the statue there, the statue shouldn't be there. That doesn't diminish my pride in my Italian-American heritage and the fact that it was a country discovered by an Italian, named for an Italian-American Vespucci. So I have that pride, but I don't care that much about statues.
Yeah, total bollocks, total nonsense. I mean,
kind of federal government buildings. I mean, kind of.
Well, it's like
what she was talking about.
Well, it's like this. She's like, well, I don't care, about the statues. That's up to the community to decide. Really, that's not true. She was like, well, I don't want statues to traitors. Specifically referring to the Confederacy or Confederate generals. And yeah, I get that too. I don't want. I don't want the same thing either. I don't want Confederate statues, in the halls of Congress, because I do believe, like, I did a video once on that about, how, neo-Confederates and, the libertarians who hold water for them with my video, Isolationist Hacks and Quacks. And with,
I wouldn't take them all. I wouldn't remove them all. I mean, I'm not going to say remove them. Like, it's kind of like, I'm not saying like to erase history completely. Like, you have to remove every statue of every one of them. Like, okay, like you don't agree with what they stand for, but could they at least these statues exist? I mean, in like private quarters, like if you don't want them in here, if you don't want them in certain areas, fine. I mean,
well, I don't like Confederate statues in general. Here's the thing. I agreed with removing those statues, not tearing them down, but having them removed by the city councils and stuff like that. Because, I just did not feel, good with, honoring, people that literally raised their
honoring people. I mean, it's not honoring people, but like, you may not like it, but it's like, you might not like it, but it's part of history.
Well, but the thing is that it was meant to honor people that wage war against their own country. But that's a separate topic, though. But the thing is, though, is that I had this fear, though. Like, I had this fear that the people would go a step further. That it just wouldn't be enough to tear down Confederate statues. That then they would go and say, "Oh, I want to now tear down statues of the founding fathers," or then tear down statues of historical figures like Christopher Columbus, because that's what happened. Is that it then became, okay, well, now we got this one. Now we're going to expand it further. Now we want to get rid of the statues of people like Winston Churchill.
Okay. I still think that the Confederate statues should still exist somewhere.
Well, I'm going to disagree on that. I'm here to.
I'm not saying a museum.
Well, in a museum, yeah. I mean, in a museum, that's where it's appropriate. But with Christopher Columbus, I'm specifically defending Western figures like Christopher Columbus and Winston Churchill, because people are calling to have their statues removed, despite the fact how they did incredibly great things, created our Western civilization, and are some of our biggest heroes. And you saw that video right there of Nancy Pelosi, essentially giving Delpa talk. Oh, I'm proud to be Italian American, but I'm not really wedded to those statues. That's up to the community to decide. Yeah, then I would respond to Nancy Pelosi with this.
I do think community should decide if let's say for the Confederate statues, like if people don't want if you don't really want Confederate statues, if you want this kind of statue, that's fine. Like I'm not going to really disagree with her on that. Like what that community, I'll let the communities decide. But if you don't.
Well, I think about this right here. It's talking, Nancy Pelosi talking out of both sides of her mouth, saying that, oh, well, the community should decide what statues they want. And, with
if people want statues,
so
if I want a Confederate statue to kind of represent, like, if I'm on my own, like private property, that's fine. Like, that's fine.
Well, private property is different than government property. I don't want Confederate statues on government property, and I talked about this in my video. Isolationist hacks and quacks, MDVET for peace, because I was specifically attacking a guy.
These guys, if the left wants, far left guys want statues of Vladimir Lenin and Mao Zedong, they can have it on their house. Don't try to put those. Don't try to put those in like government headquarters and stuff like that, or.
Well, no, it's like this.
Imagine buildings.
Well, no, but let's imagine this though. Imagine there was a group of right wingers, okay, with let's say a George Floyd statue, and those haven't been put up. We've seen those being put up. If a bunch of right wingers decided to protest and then eventually dismantle a George Floyd statue, does anyone think that Nancy Pelosi would really be saying the same thing? Would she be saying, well, I'm not really wedded to statues and that's up to community side? No, she wouldn't. She'd be saying, oh, that's so awful. Oh, this is just, it's racism. Oh, you can't just destroy these statues,
Yeah, you got to put George Floyd. If you can say whatever you want about Derek Chauvin, but like at the same time, like would you put like statues of George Floyd in every piece of government buildings though?
Yeah, I wouldn't. And I don't think George Floyd is deserving of a statue. George Floyd.
Even if Derek Chauvin even if Derek Chauvin even murdered the guy, like that doesn't automatically mean that you make a statue of him, like make him this big name hero or anything. Like just put him like you just in bold glorify him, like because he's just basically one guy. He didn't do anything significant enough.
Yeah. I want to highlight a couple of things said in the chat real quick. I really like what Mexicanator said, which is, hot take, European colonization was good. I'm totally in agreement with that 100%. What Christopher Columbus coming to the Western world was the beginning of the end of paganism in North, Central, and South America. And when you talk about paganism in North and Central South America, you had literally cannibalism, you had human sacrifice. And so why in the heck would, would you want these things to exist? You wouldn't. These things are absolutely repugnant. And Christopher Columbus coming to the New World, discovering, a way to get into the New World, it was the chance for Christianity to come out and destroy these pagan influences that had been so vile and destructive upon their own populations. I mean, the Aztecs and the Mayans and all their human sacrifice and would kill literally thousands of people, sometimes in their religious festivals in a day. We're lucky talking tens of thousands, thousands, even maybe in tens of thousands of people sacrificed in one day. I mean, can you imagine that? They were this sick bloodlust. And I'm glad, so when Mexicanator says, European colonization was a good thing. I agree with that because it ended those barbaric practices. And I also want to go what Tristan said, right here, Confederate statues belong in a museum. And for the left, to compare Winston Churchill and Columbus to Confederates is so horrid, but a sad reality of modern delusions. You're absolutely right, Tristan. When it comes to Winston Churchill, who literally defended Western civilization from National Socialism and from Stalinism, to see that people are bastardizing him is absolutely disgraceful. And the same thing with Columbus, how we see Columbus bastardized as well, is absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah.
And I just want to go. I want to show another video to just highlight the madness of these people who want to see Columbus Day removed, and want to see it destroyed. And I also want to highlight too the hypocrisy along the left and other people who are essentially making excuses for the Christopher Columbus stuff going down, but don't care though about they want to see Christopher Columbus destroyed, but they don't care about they don't care about our well. Let me just get it. So just here it is. By the way, this is happening in Minnesota right here. At the state capitol. This happened about a year ago. Yeah, so notice how they all celebrate, and the statue being torn down, and then you saw, I think in that video, the American flag being draped upside down and stuff like that. I also want to show just some of the absolute madness of these crowds, in other circumstances. Let's go right here to TRT World. Yeah, so you see all these black-clad people. I mean, you cannot tell me that these people here are not members of Antifa, or these, which were essentially Stalinists and Marxist-Leninists and anarchists. So do you just see how crazy these people are, how maddening they are? But let's see what happens though when it happens to a statue of their liking. In just a second, let's look at this one too. Literally, you had even one flag, statue literally set on fire in Virginia. I mean. Yeah, you see how mad these people are. They're just absolutely insane. I would love to see though what would happen though if that were to happen to one of their own statues. You know,
Like what?
like if you were to do like something like that to one of those George Floyd statues, which is just, it's really disgraceful to have one of those up. But let's just see the differences in how people think when it comes to George Floyd, who literally pointed a gun at a pregnant woman's stomach, compared to Christopher Columbus, who helped found Western civilization.
Wait a minute. I actually thought before, like, you kind of said like Derek Chauvin is like guilty of like murder or something like that.
Well, I'm not. Well, what I didn't mention even Chauvin. I'm talking about George Floyd and Christopher Columbus right here.
Yeah.
Let's go over this.
Vandalism targeting a George Floyd statue in Brooklyn. Just 8 days after it was unveiled, the face was spray painted. The NYPD's hate crimes unit is now investigating. Eyewitness News reporter NJ Burkett is live tonight in Flatbush with the very latest. NJ.
Well, there's Flatbush Avenue and Nostrand Avenue. It's known here in Brooklyn as the Junction. You know, they have been scouring this monument literally for hours, using their bare hands, at times even using toothbrushes. Yes, the NYPD's Hate Crimes Task Force is investigating. And late this afternoon, the NYPD's Chief of Department, Rodney Harrison, told reporters that he is confident that they will find the people who did this.
NYPD detectives are pounding the pavement on Flatbush Avenue tonight as cleanup crews struggle to restore the monument. An 11-foot tall bust of George Floyd, blasted with black paint barely 5 days after it was unveiled.
It ripped my heart out. This has got to stop.
Police say it happened in the middle of the night. The monument was defaced not only with black paint, its base was tagged with the website of a self-proclaimed neo-fascist organization. NYPD Chief of Department Rodney Harrison.
Hate crimes have been doing a phenomenal job this year, solving a lot of these cases. So I'm sure they'll get down to the bottom of the pool.
Monument producer Lindsay Eschel.
I'm not going to get emotional, but to come up today and see that someone in the name of hate came through the night and defaced it. And in the night when we couldn't see their face, they snuck in. It's really, really devastating.
The statue was unveiled here on Juneteenth. It's made of wood, specifically 200 individual sheets of plywood, perfectly cut and bound together. And it was defaced on the eve of the sentencing of George Floyd's convicted killer, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin.
It's only been 5 days, and it's very disheartening, and it's disgusting, and it's sad.
Floyd family spokesperson Courtney Nelson.
It seems to me someone can deface a statue, but you can't stop the movement.
You can't stop the movement because a statue is an inanimate object. That's why I can be mad. Yes, it's a statue, and I can be mad, and I understand what it represents, but change is here, and you can't stop change.
Now, late this afternoon, the Newark, New Jersey Police Department announced that an unrelated George Floyd statue in their city had also been defaced in a similar way and tagged by the same group in what would appear to have been a coordinated effort. You can see in the pictures from Newscopter 7, that vandalism has since been cleaned up. It's going to take them a little.
So it's just absolutely, ridiculous. The different perspectives that we're seeing here, the absolute, people being apologetics for and literally allowing for Christopher Columbus monuments to be dismembered, defaced, and destroyed with no response whatsoever. You didn't see in those videos that you showed, police stepping in and arresting those people for defacing and destroying those monuments. But now when it comes to George Floyd, who, yes, should not have been killed in the way he was, and yes, his killer, Derek Chauvin, is going to prison for a very long time, and was, and was convicted. The issue with George Floyd is that he was no saint. He was no hero. He literally had a huge criminal history and literally pointed once a gun at a pregnant woman's stomach. And we're putting up statues to him and we're idolizing him. But yet with Christopher Columbus, who literally helped found Western Christian civilization in North, Central, and South America who began the age of exploration through the West, who is one of our greatest heroes. His statues get torn down, his statues get defaced, his statues get destroyed, and no response.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the court. Yeah, Derek Chavin's guilty, I would say, of manslaughter. I would say that the death of George Floyd was by manslaughter, but all of a sudden that they try to make a hero out of him. Like, I think the one Texas governor actually set up his big golden funeral somewhere. But like, if you tear that statue down, that's a hate crime.
Yeah, what about
Just
the?
tear
Yeah, it should be a hate crime to tear down Christopher Columbus's statue. You know, I mean,
and
because
statues like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson.
yeah, exactly, because it's like I talked about earlier. It's all this anti-European, anti-Christian, and also in the case of Christopher Columbus, anti-Jewish sentiment that is going on. You know, it's absolutely repugnant that we would allow these communists and these Marxists to literally destroy and deface and defame one of our greatest heroes, and literally have no response. And the problem is that we're not seeing enough political leaders standing up for our history. You know, let's look, and it's not just in America, but even in Central America. So let's look real quickly at a video in Mexico. You know, because Mexicanator, you're from Mexico yourself, right? Or is your family from Mexico? Because you said you're mestizo. I just wanted to check, if you're Mexican American or if you're an immigrant from Mexico. Because I want to show you. And I wish you'd come on the chat, my friend, to discuss this with me and Dragon. But I want to show this, this.
I'm half Mexican, half Irish.
Oh, you are? So let me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty neat right there. That's a good mix. So let's watch this one right here. Because it's not just happening in the United States, everyone. It's happening in other nations. It's also happening in Central America. Again, because remember, Antifa and communist influence has a long arm, and we have to fight it everywhere. So let's look at this.
No estoy de acuerdo en tener ese tipo de monumentos en la calle porque pienso que representan represión o también un tipo de represión que hubo en esa época. Entonces, para mí debería de haber otro tipo de monumentos que incentiven otro tipo de pensamiento que tener a estas personas en un monumento como tipo idolatrándolas cuando son personas que la verdad no hicieron como un bien para las personas en la época.
Yeah, like she's oppressing. Yeah, she probably wants to replace the Christopher Columbus statue with a Che Guevara statue. And when you look at how crazy these people are on these Antifa, Marxist, Leninists.
What, she just argued for like a Che Guevara statue?
Well, no, she didn't argue it for it. I'm just suggesting that she probably, because she was saying, remember that we should have like one that's not one repression like other statues. She's probably one of the kind of people that would want a Che Guevara, freaking statue up there,
And a Fidel Castro statue.
Yeah, for sure. So you're okay. So you're Mexican American. Okay, that's cool. Because we got to protect our history, my friend. Our heritage. And the thing about it is that we're seeing that.
What does Mexico have related to Columbus in any way?
Well, of course, because Christopher Columbus, remember, is the originator of Western expansion and Christian civilization in Mexico, in America, in every nation, because he was the original. He was the first. He set the standard and for travel and exploration, and found the way to the new to the new world. And so all these nations owe him a huge debt of gratitude, you know, for what he has done for Western Christian civilization. And, you know, to see that, you know, these statues being torn down, not just, you know, here, you know, but also in nations in Central America, you know, and just to see them defaced, it's just downright despicable, you know. And I mean, it's just downright sad, you know, that these communists are literally allowed to do this. And in the cases that I showed you guys earlier, in Mexico City, the government removed it due to political pressure. In places like, you know, Minneapolis and those other states that we showed, they were removed by force, and the police that, you know, didn't step in to stop it, even though they should have. You know, but in the case of Chicago, that was different. And just to show you, this just goes to show you the violence of these far left Antifa groups. And I'm gonna, geez, I wish I wouldn't do that. I'm gonna show you guys this too, so that way you can check it out. So in this case, you can clearly see that the members and the people in this crowd are Antifa types and sympathetic communists and such like that, BLM. You can see the symbol right there. You could also see the anarchist symbol clearly displayed right here. The red and black, you know, very, you know, common among the communists and Marxists. So they had originally surrounded this Christopher Columbus statue in Chicago with the intent to tear it down. Police would eventually come in and try to stop it. And just so here are the police moving in to try to stop it. And you see those firecrackers, they're being attacked by this crowd. Yeah, so notice how the protesters too are actually these Antifa types are actually pretty organized. They're using these bikes as literally shields to even force the police back.
Is this in Portland?
No, this was in Chicago. See? So, as you can see right there, these people literally attacked the police with explosive devices, as you can see right there, you know, causing several injuries. I mean, that's essentially a felony. And that's how crazy these people have gotten, that they're willing to attack police officers protecting these statues from vandalization. And it's so just absolutely repugnant. You know, it's so ridiculous, you know that, I mean, in some cities, the police have just abrogated their responsibility to protect our history by, you know, just letting the protesters do what they want. In this case, in Chicago, they tried to step in, and then the mob attacked them with explosive devices, through water bottles, through other objects at them, with the intent to do harm to these police. I mean, these essentially are Marxist terrorists, communist terrorists, and anarchist terrorists in action, you know, literally trying to destroy Western civilization as we know it. And, you know, it's just despicable that our political leadership, you know, like I showed you earlier, Nancy Pelosi, you know, says, oh, you know, well, I don't care, you know, essentially. But, you know, George Floyd, who was essentially a criminal, you know, who, yes, was murdered unjustly, but still a criminal nonetheless, gets a statue in his honor, and that statue gets vandalized, and everyone has a panic attack over it and calls it.
Yeah, it was pretty much second degree. He was pretty much murdered on murder, like second degree, like, and he gets like He gets all the statues everywhere. Like that wasn't even planned, or not that it wasn't even planned. Like it was just some random incident.
Yeah, and
But he's a hero, like a big damn hero, like unironically.
yeah, and a hero for what? You know what? For he was a victim of police brutality. He contributed nothing to Christianity, Western civilization, or America in general.
That's like me getting shot in the face, but like, do I get an automatic statue now?
Yeah, it only happened, but Christopher Columbus statues, I mean, they're getting torn down and vandalized and destroyed because of these Marxist terrorists and these communist advocates and these Marxist Leninists and other groups who are just essentially bastardizing the man who literally made it possible for them and their grandfathers and grandmothers to come here and start a new life. Without Christopher Columbus, there would not be America, Western civilization, and there would not be the free world as we know it, and so I agree with you, Mexicanator, totally. European colonization in America was a good thing. It ended human sacrifice. It ended cannibalism. It eventually, over time, ended.
But did some European countries kind of like go to other countries and conquer for like gold at one point?
Yeah, well, so do the indigenous tribes. They try to conquer each other for land, for resources. So that suggestion that they used to attack Christopher Columbus, like, well, it was this wonderful, peaceful land before, they came here. Give me a break. We all know that's a bunch of nonsense.
Like, there were probably indigenous people who were just as bad as the white Europeans, if not worse. Yeah, just cut out.
Sorry. So I want to show this tweet right here. It says right here, people that blank on Columbus are mostly doing it because they have a problem with Europeans coming to the New World. Absolutely. It's what I mentioned earlier. It's an anti-European mindset. This idea that, anti-European, anti-Christian attitude. It's just nonsense, and it has to stop. And we have got to stop it. But the problem is that people are letting it happen because they're not willing to fight for our history, and this is just sad, just sad, and this is unfortunate, but we have to stand up for our history. Christopher Columbus is one of the great icons of Western civilization. He's one of the great icons of European history upon American history. And he was not just that, but also of Portuguese Jewish history.
Yeah. Yeah, he tried to convert like Native Americans to Christianity.
Yeah, Dragon, please, look at the private chat. I'll be back in a second. Okay, never mind. Anyway, it's important for us to defend and protect our history and stop bastardizing it.
He tried to convert Native Americans to Christianity.
Yeah, and it was better. Christianity was a lot better than the pagan religions that they were following. let's not forget that, when the Spaniards were fighting the Aztecs and other groups, other tribes allied with the Spaniards because the Aztecs were essentially committing human sacrifice on other peoples. I mean, by the thousands and even tens of thousands. So let's not forget that Mesoamerican or indigenous civilization was peaceful. It was not. It was extremely violent, extremely depraved, and Christianity and European colonization ended those abhorrent practices.
Well, I would say long term.
Well, it ended them. That's why it's good. It ended those abhorrent practices and created a better world in which, European immigrants from Spain, from France, from England, from Scotland, from Holland were able to come here and start a new life. And peoples in the region and who were indigenous that were once subject to the barbarism of cannibalism and human sacrifice.
This may be a hard take, but I think the Native Americans were drunk. They were kind of not the reason why they lost out because we weren't disciplined.
Well, it's not that. It's that Native Americans, indigenous peoples, were always so divided. They were never united.
Well, each of their tribe weren't disciplined enough. So
Well, no, it's that they were constantly in warfare with each other. So when you have, there was never really a united Native American front against Europeans, except the closest it came to was Tecumseh, and that was it, though. But the fact of the matter is that Native American tribes were always.
A lot of them sided with the British.
Well, there were plenty with the Americans too. It's also the same thing with the French and Indian War. I mean, there were some who fought with the British, and then there were some who fought with the French. So each different factions, took their own.
Some were even colonists.
Yeah, exactly. Because there was an attempt to assimilate some Native Americans into American society. Now, Andrew Jackson stopped that, and that's why Andrew Jackson's pretty hated among a lot of people today, because his policies were very anti-Native American and discriminatory to Native Americans. But the fact of the matter is that Columbus is blamed unjustly for every single conflict and issue that arose between indigenous peoples and Europeans. Columbus is not responsible for any alleged crimes or any alleged depravities. And to suggest that he is simply because he was the first great explorer who helped set the path for European colonization of North Central South America is totally bogus. And I like what Mexicanator says here too. You should be on here, Mexicanator. Really, I wish you were here. Talking about this with me. Because Cortez was a master diplomat. His ability to negotiate other tribes against the Aztecs was pretty incredible. Defeating the Aztec Empire was pretty incredible. It doesn't matter whether they had, guns and horses. They were outnumbered by an incredible number of people. And the Aztecs had friends. And yet Cortez and his native allies and his troops were able to defeat one of the most brutal empires in Central American or in American history. Defeating the Aztecs was a huge monumental achievement, and that makes him essentially one of the history's, Western Hemisphere's greatest fighters, leaders, and generals. Because this was a man who literally, brought down one of the most barbaric empires in history, the Aztec Empire.
Aztec had an empire?
Well, yeah. How do you not know this? The Aztec Empire was an empire. It wasn't just a tribe in just one little region. It had gotten rich and wealthy all the gold and stuff like that by conquering other tribes and massacring other tribes and enslaving other tribes and committing human sacrifice on other tribes.
Yeah, they only talk about whites owning black slaves. You don't hear much about like indigenous people having slaves themselves.
Yeah, I mean,
look, you can look this up on, listen to Thomas Sowell.
Yeah, I mean, because so here's the Aztec Empire right here, around 1518. It's the time, of when around the Spaniards. So this was at its height. The Mayans were in decline. The Mayans had been in a long decline. Their civilization was going down. They would have been easy prey for the Aztecs if the Aztecs had been successful in defeating the Spaniards. Thank God they weren't. But this was the empire that the Aztecs had built, and they essentially had conquered many other tribes. And Cortez allied with other tribes, for example, like the Talascan tribe, and they were specifically located in this region right here, surrounded by the Aztecs. So when Cortez came through, he went through their territory, and they worked together to essentially bring down and destroy the Aztecs. And there's other groups right here. There are lots of other native indigenous tribes that worked with Cortez because, just like Mexicanator says, they oppressed others. So it just goes to show you that the lies that the left goes to teach about Cortez, not just about Cortez, but of Christopher Columbus. It's just anti-European, anti-Spaniard, anti-British, anti-Christian attitudes, and even anti-Semitic attitudes that are just coming out. Because just people just trying to delegitimize, everything about Western Christian civilization.
Yeah, exactly the point. Yeah, it's exactly the point. Christopher Columbus. Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
like you get taught this in school not constantly, but from time to time. It's kind of like a consensus that you point out. It's like he's just like mass murderer.
Yeah,
Murderer,
totally.
Like he's
I mean,
this
they
big
do
bad
this.
guy, Captain Planet villain.
Yeah, they do it to bastardize and destroy, a person like Columbus. Because, but it's not just Columbus they're coming after. They're coming after, other great explorers or other great, Spaniards or other Portuguese or whoever. They're coming after, for example, conquistadors. Like Juan de Onate. And remember that incident in which there was actually a shooting over that because of the protests that occurred right there. And I'm going to try to show the video here so the viewers can see it. So let me get it right here. So there's right there. Look at the sheriff's department, essentially. So you just heard that right there. Someone shout Antifa. Oh, gosh.
Bye-bye. Goodbye. No more Oñate.
This is awful, but let's look at what preceded that, though. which was the shooting that happened there with Ray Baca. Because that was what preceded the statue coming down and being torn down. It was essentially the city and the local, county capitulating to these Antifa types who used violence to try to remove the statue before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just want to warn the audience real quick. It says right here, this video contains disturbing content, because remember, someone was shot. So if you want to avoid listening to that, seeing that content, then just look away.
I'll look at it.
So this is the aftermath right here of the shooting, right there. But I'm trying to find the actual video itself of the actual shooting.
On those protesting.
In Albuquerque, New Mexico, one man was shot and remains in critical condition after gunfire erupted when protesters tried to take down the statue of a Spanish conquistador. Albuquerque police, who fired chemical irritants and flashbangs to control the crowd, saying they received reports about vigilante groups possibly instigating the violence. And in Richmond, Virginia,
Which isn't really true, because if you look at the video of what actually occurred, the person was attacked by the mob, and I'm just trying to find it. Oh, here, I'm hoping that this is it, because damn it. I can't seem to find it.
The conquistadors. The Aztecs were not white Europeans, so that's okay, bro.
Well, the thing is, it's just absolutely abhorrent that we're literally okay. I think I found it finally. All right, so finally I found it. And now I'm going to show the audience this, because there we go. So what happened was Steve Baca, as you can see, Steve Baca was originally up on the statue area. Okay, all right. He was trying to prevent them from destroying the statue. Okay, and now the members of these Antifa Gromius groups pushed him, and then he pushed back. And what happened is that you can see right here, he was attacked by people with skateboards. They began to beat him and attack him. And so what does he start to do? He starts to retreat, wise in that situation, because you don't want to be assaulted and, or be killed. So as you can see, he's trying to leave the scene and avoid an escalation. But these Antifa types continue to attack him. As you can see, he's surrounded, and they try to beat him. Yeah, and so that's what he does. He then shoots back when they're attacking him, trying to kill him, trying to assault him. And it just goes to show you that these people, when you try to protect these statues of our history, of our European history, whether it's English with Winston Churchill, or whether it's Spanish with this statue in particular, or when it's Portuguese Jewish, like it is with Christopher Columbus. These people are just trying to destroy our statues, our history, like Conquistador Juan de Onate, who was a great explorer, Christopher Columbus, who was a great
Who's
explorer.
Conquistador? He was from another guy from Portugal.
No, that guy was from Spain.
Yeah.
But it goes back to what
I think
Mexicanator
I've heard
was
it
mentioning.
before, but I kind of forgot eventually.
Yes, because it's not just Christopher Columbus they come after. It's, even though that's the focus of this video, it's the others they're coming after. Winston Churchill, Cortez, Onate, because what they're trying to do is essentially destroy our history of Western Christian exploration and civilization, and this has to stop. And I would invite people to start standing up for our history, and obviously I know that we have to start writing letters to our congressmen, our senators, or our city councilmen, and telling them, or councilwomen, and telling them, no, we don't want our history removed. We don't want statues of Columbus removed. We don't want statues of Onate removed. We don't want statues of Cortez removed. We don't want statues of Churchill removed. And we should also be writing our senators and our local city council reps and stuff like that, and telling them, hey, we don't want statues of people like George Floyd, And so we should replace every statue of George Floyd and replace it with a statue of a great person from history, like for example, Cortez, who brought down one of the most evil, vile empires in Central America, or put a statue of Columbus, who helped found, Western American Christian civilization in the New World, or put one of our great thinkers like John Adams. What the heck are we doing? When we're putting up statues of, the people who do not deserve them. Tragic as their deaths.
Try to put the statue of like Rayshard Brooks where you're at it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I look, just because you're a victim of police brutality does not,
Rayshard Brooks wasn't.
Well, I'm talking about George Floyd and specifically, but what are you going to? But same thing, with Rayshard Brooks, though. Even though and that's disgusting that the police are literally in this situation fighting for their lives and careers over a guy who literally, was drunk and shot a taser at them. I mean, the officer in that case is literally being charged with felony murder and 10 other offenses. This is just absolutely ridiculous, And we need to stop caving to.
It's like catering to the dreads of society.
We need to stop catering to the Antifa types. We need to start caving to the far left. We need to stop caving to these people who essentially want to say that Christian European civilization colonization was bad. We need to stop caving into these people, and we need to start standing up for our history and these great people in history who did incredible and amazing things, rather than criminals. It's just absolutely repugnant. I mean, it just goes to show you the moral nihilism in our society. When we're literally making statues of people who are criminals and destroying, defaming, and of statues of people, of great men and women of history. When it like Columbus.
Yep.
And it's just absolutely horrendous, And I'm going to post to this is going to be a hot take right here, but I'm going to post also support for Steve Baca here in the chat right here. If you want to go help with Steve Baca's defense fund, you can do so at the link that
he's defending the idea of Christopher Columbus, right?
No, that was Onate. So the Spaniard Conquistador, the statue in New Mexico, which was honoring, great Spanish explorers who literally explored the wilds of the Southwest, dangerous territory with deserts, the elements, the sun, but not just that, but also wild animals. I mean, at the time, you have to remember that there were grizzly bears because the grizzly range actually extended all the way even into Arizona, New Mexico at one point. They even had jaguars because remember, even jaguars, while they're pretty much almost non-existent in places like Arizona, there's like maybe, less than a dozen in the wild. Back then, there used to be all over the place. And so these men were, not just battling with the elements, but also dangerous wild animals, but also, hostile populations that, if they had caught them, would have burned them alive. So instead of, we should be honoring those great conquistadores and those great explorers, rather than bastardizing them. So that's why I wanted to put this thing for Steve Baca, because again, Steve Baca is essentially fighting for his life and his future and his freedom, for defending himself from Antifa types that wanted to kill him. I mean, just like, Officer, just like Officer Rolfe, over, who's literally being charged with felony murder over Rayshard Brooks, a guy that literally tried to fire a taser at him and do harm to him, and we have to start protecting, our history.
Yeah, the Rayshard Brooks, he's also he also had family issues.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he had family issues, and his family wasn't there to support him and be there for him. They're there after he was killed, but not there for him when he was alive. So, and
even George Floyd. Here's the irony of all this: you don't even know the man.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just absolutely astounding that people who are criminals and who have criminal histories, like George Floyd, who I showed you earlier, are getting statues, and their deaths are tragic because George Floyd, yes, should not have died that day, should not have been killed that day, but he is not a hero. His death is a tragedy, and the person who killed him is being punished for it, justly. But why are you going to build a statue to a man who literally had a huge, lengthy criminal record simply because his death was unjust? He was not a good person, and it's not like he was not like Christopher Columbus, who literally helped found, Western Christian civilization here in the North and Central South America. He's not like Onate, who braved, wild animals, the elements, and hostile tribes to explore the Southwest. He's not like, Cortez, who literally brought down one of the most evil empires in in Central American history. The Aztecs.
So European imperialism is better than it was. Pretty much imperialism versus imperialism.
Well, it was Christianity destroying paganism. And that was a good thing because
they weren't exactly pagans, but they had more than one religion.
Well, they were pagans because it's not like pagan in the European sense. Paganism is really, as a religion, is not like the worship.
Different tribes, but they had different beliefs, whatever.
Yeah, so those beliefs, are pagan because they believe in these traditional, animistic or whatever gods. But but we need to be honoring.
It was pretty much Christianity versus all these other beliefs. I mean, or it was pretty much. I mean, European imperialism is moral compared to these other imperialistic tribes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just really disappointed to see us fail on our responsibility. We're going on the oh man, I didn't even realize what time it was. Shoot, we're already at the hour and
You want
40
to hit the 2
mark.
hour mark?
I actually don't want to hit the 2 hour mark. I usually like to stick to my videos to an hour and a half. I didn't realize that I went overtime. So Dragon, next 3 to 5 minutes. Give me some closing thoughts so we can from your end on Christopher Columbus defending European Christian history, defending a great Jewish Portuguese sailor and explorer, and defending his legacy, which was to find a homeland for Jewish people to escape persecution in Spain, but also to help spread Christianity, and his influence upon future explorers and future colonists who ended up defeating and destroying human sacrifice, cannibalism, and other barbaric practices.
I would say that Christopher Columbus treated you can say he was brutal in his own right, but he still treated Native Americans better than the other and the tribes on the other side. Better than they treated each other. To be quite honest, because it's kind of European imperialism, it was either that or you would have this other or the other forms of imperialism, which are even worse. So it's not a good they would also do it the thing people here, I think the far left is mad that because the white man was successful at it. I mean, that's the thing, they're just good at it. Pretty much it. I mean, it was good long term, and that's that kind of later on. But on the reason why is because these tribes also native. There's not too many Native Americans around these days, is because they lacked the discipline, and plus they were fighting each other. So there's that, and yeah, keep Christopher Columbus Day, man, because without him, this country would not be founded. This country would not even exist.
Absolutely, 100%. Without Christopher Columbus, we would not have America, would not have all the great benefits that we have. So everyone here, whether their ancestry is Spaniard, British, Scot, French, Welsh, Dutch, Portuguese Jewish, whatever, it's because of Christopher Columbus that you have a nation to call your own, that you have all the benefits that you have here. And I love this, what Tristan says right here. Columbus and Cortez were revolutionary for mankind's knowledge and helped destroy the most barbaric empires in history. The modern echo chamber has destroyed the images of these men, and it's very sad to see. Tristan, I agree with you 100%. And it's up to us to defend great Jewish Portuguese heroes like Columbus, and great Catholic Spanish heroes like Cortez, who have been bastardized by history, and it's got to stop. Anyway, Dragon, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to close now, but I thank you so much. Okay, you have a great night.
You too, man.
So, everyone, I want to thank you so much for coming on to this stream. I want to thank you so much for listening. It's so important, ladies and gentlemen, that we talk about here what Tristan says. We also do what Mexican talk about what Mexicanator said. That Christian Western civilization is worth fighting for and defending. That is a neoconservative position. I am not going to, as a neoconservative, sacrifice my position on Western Christian civilization and pretend that it had no effect on history. a neoconservative position must be to defend the great heroes of our past, like Christopher Columbus. And when it comes to this day, Christopher Columbus Day has to be defended. We cannot sacrifice the ground to communists, anarchists, and Marxists who want to take our history of great men and great leaders like Christopher Columbus, like Hernando Cortez, and others, and destroy their legacy. We cannot do that. The left, the far left, will complain and say, "Oh well, what about those Confederate statues? Those are not the same thing." I don't believe I've already had a video on that where I talked about that and talked about neo-Confederate propaganda. I am not a fan of Confederate statues, and I'm glad that they're taken down, because those statues were built to honor traitors. They were built to honor people who literally rose up arms against the United States and rose up arms to destroy this country. They rose up in effect to attack Christian Western civilization because they were trying to protect slavery. That is not the same thing as Christopher Columbus or Hernando Cortez or others. These individuals were fighting for Western Christian civilization, but also but we're also doing other humanitarian things. We've already talked about how Christopher Columbus was trying to find a homeland for Spanish Jews who had been persecuted by the monarchy. He himself was Jewish. He had a Jewish mother. He was Catholic by faith, but he was Jewish by ethnicity and by race, and Portuguese Jewish. And so he was heartfelt. He had serious sympathy for the Jews of Spain, and wanted to give them a home in which they could be safe from persecution, and give European Jews a place where they could be safe from persecution. And he found Cuba. He explored the New World. He set the ground for people in Western Europe to begin a new life for themselves, and to bring about the ideas of freedom and liberty and equality, and to bring about Christian reform, civilization to societies and civilizations that had been once barbaric and murderous. So I'm not going to bastardize conquistadores like Juan de Onate. I'm not going to bastardize conquistadores like Hernando Cortez. I'm not going to bastardize great explorers like Christopher Columbus. We need to stand up for them. We need to stand up for their legacy and for their history. And we need to challenge the communists and the Marxist-Leninists and the anarchists who are trying to destroy their legacy and destroy the history. Just like what Mexicanator says, European colonization was a good thing for the Western world. It marked the end of barbarism in North and South and Central America. And if you want an Indigenous Peoples Day to honor the good aspects of Indigenous culture, of good aspects of Native American culture, whether that tribe is Cree or Crow or Seminole or Iroquois or Apache, then have a different day. Take a different day. But what they're trying to do, though, is destroy Christopher Columbus Day and replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day, because they're trying to destroy the legacy of one of the history's greatest men, greatest explorers, and greatest individuals. And you know what? Not going to stand for that. Not going to let it go lightly. We're going to oppose it as neoconservatives, because we stand up for Western Christian civilization against the forces of communism and socialism. So thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. I appreciate your time. Please give Dragon a like and a follow on Twitter. Please give me a like and a follow on Twitter. Support me on Ko-Fi. Follow me on YouTube and Twitch. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. And don't forget, death to all tyrants and V for victory.